The ambassador's claw slammed down on the polished obsidian table, shattering the fragile silence of the Galactic Council's chamber. This is an outrage. Humanity cannot simply withdraw without explanation. The Zorvian representative's multifaceted eyes bulged, his iridescent scales flushing a deep crimson as he scanned the empty human delegation seats. Around the vast starlit amphitheater, 100 alien species leaned forward in their hovering pods, murmurs rippling like static through the recycled air. The Krell emissary, a towering mass of tentacles, extruded a probing appendage toward the vacant podium. Protocol demands justification. Have the humans malfunctioned? Are they defective? High above in the shadowed observation gallery, Ilara Voss gripped the railing, her knuckles whitening against the cool metal. She'd seen this coming for months, humanity's quiet pivot away from the Council's endless debates and resource grabs. But watching it unfold, the raw panic etching the aliens' faces stirred something fierce in her chest. As chief strategist for the Exodus Initiative, she knew the truth. Silence was the sharpest weapon left. Below, the avian Thalix delegate fluttered her feathered arms in agitation. They owe us alliances. Shared tech. Without humans, our fleet defenses crumble. Who will maintain the warp relays? Her voice cracked, echoing off the crystalline walls that mimicked a nebula's glow. Ilara suppressed a wry smile. The humans had maintained those relays, all right, pouring blood and ingenuity into a system that treated them like junior partners, always one veto away from irrelevance. No more. The decision had been made in closed sessions on Earth. Pull out, consolidate, build anew. No speeches, no ultimatums, just gone. The chamber's central hologram flickered to life, projecting the latest interstellar map. Red alerts pulsed over human-colonized sectors, now marked as unaffiliated. The Vexari Prime, a serpentine figure coiled around her pedestal, hissed through her translator. This abandonment endangers us all. Pirate clans will swarm the voids they leave behind. We must compel their return, deploy envoys, sanctions, anything. Laughter bubbled up in Ilara's throat, but she bit it back. Compel? The Council had spent decades underestimating humans, dismissing their primitive resilience, their knack for turning scraps into miracles. Now, with the last human ship slipping through the outer beacons, the real scrambling began. A low rumble shook the gallery as the chamber's AI intoned, "Human delegation status unresponsive. Withdrawal formalized at 1427 Universal Standard." Gasps rippled outward, the Zorvian's claw scraping furrows into the table. Ilara turned from the spectacle, her communicator buzzing softly against her wrist. Incoming from Director Hale. Phase 2 initiated. Rendezvous at Sol Fringe in 48 hours. Keep them guessing. She nodded to herself, the weight of empty space ahead feeling like freedom's first breath. Down there, the screaming had only just started. The chamber's holographic displays flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the assembled delegates as Ambassador Zorv slammed his forelimbs on the podium. Where are they? The human delegation's shuttle vanished from sensors an hour ago. No hail, no distress signal, nothing. His mandibles clicked in agitation, the sound echoing like dry leaves in the vast hall of the Galactic Concord. Lyra perched on her elevated seat, feathers ruffling as she scanned the data streams pouring in from the core worlds. Vanished? That's not possible. Their ships don't just blink out. Check the relays again. Maybe it's a glitch in the quantum net. Her voice carried that sharp edge, always probing for the overlooked flaw. But even she couldn't hide the tremor in her talons gripping the console. Grunk leaned forward, his scaled bulk shifting with a low rumble. Glitch? Huh, humans don't glitch. They build the nets we all rely on. If they're gone, it's deliberate. Remember that last summit? They sat there silent as stones while we bickered over the frontier tariffs. He cracked his knuckles, the sound like cracking ice, his eyes narrowing at the empty human alcove, its banner still draped but lifeless. Zorv's compound eyes whirred, focusing on the replay of the final transmission. A simple acknowledgement from the human envoy, then static. No ultimatums, no explanations, just departure. Deliberate or not, this leaves us exposed. The Orion drift mines are automated by human algorithms. If they pull support? He trailed off, gesturing to the glowing map where red alerts bloomed like wounds across trade routes. Lyra hopped down, wings half unfurling as she paced. Exposed? Tricrippled. Our fleet's navigation cores are human-coded. Without updates, we're blind in hyperspace. She jabbed a claw at a secondary feed, reports of flickering colony shields on the rim worlds, the kind of subtle failures that escalated to catastrophe without maintenance. Grunk snorted, rising to his full height. Then we demand answers. Send probes to Sol Space. If they're playing games, we'll drag them back. But his bravado faltered as another alert chimed. A freighter lost in the void, its human-piloted AI unresponsive. The chamber fell quiet, the weight of unspoken dependencies settling like dust. Zorv signaled the comms array, his voice steady despite the churn in his gut. All frequencies hail Earth Central. Priority Alpha. The broadcast went out, a chorus of alien tongues pleading into the black. Minutes stretched, then the reply came. Not words, but silence, vast and indifferent. Lyra's feathers flattened. Grunk's tail lashed the floor. Nothing, Zorv whispered, the first crack in his composure. Outside, the station's viewports framed the stars, unchanged yet suddenly hostile, as if the galaxy itself had noticed the absence and begun to unravel. Elder Vrix clutched the armrest of his hover chair, the chamber's holographic displays flickering erratically around him. The human delegation seat stood empty, a void that had yawned open just cycles ago without fanfare. No speeches, no ultimatums, just the quiet departure of their shuttles into the void. Now the core stabilizer feeds were glitching, red warnings pulsing like infected wounds across the Council nexus. We reroute the auxiliary lines, Vrix muttered, his tendrils twitching as he jabbed at the interface. Beside him, Lyra, the sharp-tongued coordinator from the Veil Collective, leaned in, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. It's not the lines, Vrix. Look at the quantum buffers. Humans calibrated those. Without their adaptive algorithms, the whole grid's unraveling. Her voice carried that familiar edge, witty even in crisis, but undercut by a tremor she couldn't quite hide. The chamber hummed with the low whine of failing systems, air recyclers straining as if the station itself gasped for breath. Across the table, Korath, the burly enforcer from the Ironclades, slammed a fist down, rattling the untouched data slates. Brave to a fault, he'd charged into skirmishes without a second thought, but this was unraveling from within. We fix it ourselves, Korath growled, rolling up his armored sleeves to expose the ports along his forearms. I've patched hull breaches mid-battle. This is just code. He interfaced directly, his neural link sparking as he poured commands into the system. Vrix watched, hopeful for a moment, the three of them huddled like survivors in a storm. Lyra's fingers danced over a secondary panel, cross-referencing old human manuals. Relics of alliances now dust. But the buffers rejected the inputs, error cascades blooming like fractals of fire. A low rumble shook the floor, the station's orbit wobbling as gravitational compensators lagged. Sweat beaded on Vrix's scales. He'd always been the cautious one, plotting contingencies while others charged ahead. Pull back, Korath. Forcing it could cascade to the fusion cores. Korath ignored him, grunting as another surge hit, his body jolting. Lyra yanked at his arm, her voice sharp. He's right. Listen for once, you stubborn rockhead. The enforcer disengaged with a curse, smoke curling from his port, the smell acrid and metallic. The chamber lights dimmed, emergency protocols kicking in with a sterile blue glow. Outside the viewport, the stars blurred slightly, the station drifting off its precise path toward the Council's homeworld. Vrix's mind raced through protocols, but every fix looped back to human ingenuity. The subtle tweaks they'd woven into the infrastructure, invisible until gone. They didn't warn us, he said softly, more to himself. Lyra shot him a glare. Of course not. Why bother? We treated them like junior partners. Novelties with their fragile bodies and endless optimism. Korath rubbed his singed arm, his bravado cracking. What now? Call in specialists from the fringes? But the comms array was next. Another human safeguarded system, now silent. The trio exchanged glances, the weight settling like debris after an explosion. Vrix stood, steadying himself against the chair. We adapt. Start with manual overrides on the secondary bridge. Lyra nodded, grabbing a toolkit while Korath hefted a fusion welder. They moved as one, weaving through sparking corridors, the station's groans echoing their steps. But as they reached the access hatch, a new alert blared. Life support in Sector 7 failing, habitats venting atmosphere. Human-maintained seals now breached. The cost was mounting, one silent failure at a time. Kaelor gripped the console edge as the shuttle lurched, stars streaking past the viewport like accusations. The Zypheri delegation's vessel was a patchwork of hasty repairs, its engines whining in protest against the void. Beside him, Lyra's tendrils twitched, her bioluminescent eyes flickering with data streams she couldn't suppress. The human signal just vanished again, she murmured, voice a low hum through the cabin's humid air. Third time in as many cycles. They're toying with us. The pilot, a squat groon named Torv, snorted from the fore, his chitinous fingers dancing over controls. Toying or gone for good? Council's orders were clear. Intercept and negotiate. If they're silent, we're chasing ghosts. He banked hard, dodging a debris field from some forgotten skirmish, twisted metal glinting like forgotten promises. Kalor released the console, his scales itching under the recycled air. He'd volunteered for this run, driven by the Council's frantic broadcasts echoing across the relays. Humanity's abrupt exodus. No declaration, no farewell, just ships vanishing into uncharted folds. The screaming hadn't stopped. Diplomats wailing about alliances shattered, trade routes collapsing, defenses exposed. And now this faint ping, leading them deeper into the fringe sectors where even the stars seemed wary. Lyra's tendrils coiled tighter. Analyze the pattern. It's not random. Look, residual warp signatures match their colony fleets. They're rerouting, but why? Her display bloomed with holographic overlays, lines weaving like neural webs, but the data frayed at the edges. Incomplete without human encryption keys, Torv growled, accelerating through a nebula's glow. Purple vapors clinging to the hull. Because they don't need us anymore. Remember the simulations? One human vessel outmaneuvered 3 of ours in the Dravid games. Now imagine 1,000, all quiet. The shuttle shuddered as sensors pinged. Another echo, closer this time, a whisper of engine wash fading into nothing. Kalor leaned forward, staring into the abyss. The Council had built empires on human tech, their ingenuity the glue holding fractious species together. But when the audits came, exposing embezzled resources, broken pacts, humanity hadn't raged or sued. They'd packed up, engines humming softly, and left the chamber empty. Now every relay buzzed with panic. Who would maintain the arrays? Defend the borders? The screaming was the sound of realization dawning too late. Locking on, Lyra said, her voice sharpening. The ping solidified, a beacon pulsing from a rogue asteroid belt. Tor veered toward it, the shuttle's lights cutting through dust motes like knives. But as they closed, the signal splintered, forking into multiples, decoys blooming across the sector like spores. Damn their tricks, Torv muttered, throttling back. Alarms trilled softly. Energy spikes ahead, not weapons, but something subtler. A field generator masking whatever lay beyond. Kalor felt a chill ripple his scales. This wasn't evasion. It was a statement. Humanity's silence wasn't absence, it was the loudest rebuke. And if they pushed closer, they might hear the echo of their own irrelevance. Lyra's eyes dimmed, calculations stalling. They're leading us. But to what, a trap? Or an invitation we can't refuse? The asteroid loomed, pocked and silent. But scans revealed faint heat blooms. Recent activity, human-sized. Torv eased the shuttle into orbit, thrusters firing in controlled bursts. No response, no hail, just the void pressing in. Kalor unstrapped, moving to the airlock. Suit up. We're going across. His voice held steady, but inside doubt gnawed. The Council screamed for answers, but what if the truth was simpler? They'd been left behind, not out of spite, but indifference. As the ramp hissed open to the cold rock, boot prints scarred the regolith, fresh, deliberate, leading into a crevasse. Lyra hesitated, tendrils retracting. Torv hefted a scanner, his mandibles clicking. They followed the trail, lights piercing the shadow, each step echoing the unspoken question. What had humanity built here, in the quiet after their departure? Kryn's claws scraped against the console as the holographic display flickered, casting erratic shadows across the chamber. The Vexari Elder's voice boomed from the speaker, laced with that familiar hiss of urgency. Delegate Lyra, the human vessel's trajectory has shifted again. It's not heading for the core worlds. It's veering toward the Nebula Veil. Lyra's mandibles clicked in frustration, her compound eyes narrowing at the swirling map. The Nebula Veil, a graveyard of shattered stars and rogue anomalies untamed even by the Council's boldest explorers. Why there? Humanity's silence had stretched into weeks now. Their embassy dark, their fleets vanished like smoke. And yet this lone ship, the last one they'd detected, danced on the edge of known space, taunting them. She activated the comms link to her team. Zorak, report from the sensor array. Is this a feint? Zorak, The burly Croth technician with his perpetual squint of skepticism patched in from the outpost. His gravelly tone cut through the static. Negative, delegate. Power signatures match their standard drives, but they're pushing limits. Shields are fluctuating. Could be damage or deliberate overload. Ilara, the young analyst from the scholarly enclave, leaned into her own feed, her tentacles twitching as she cross-referenced data. If it's damage, why not hail us? We've broadcasted every frequency, every protocol. They're ignoring the emergency beacons. Her voice held that earnest curiosity, the kind that had earned her a spot on this crisis team, but now it edged with doubt. Lyra paced the dim-lit bridge of the Council's pursuit frigate, the hum of engines a constant reminder of their own strained resources. The Council had stripped 3 sectors bare to fuel this chase, diverting aid from famine zones and border skirmishes. Meaningful cost indeed, the kind that bred resentment among the lesser species. Because they want us to follow, she muttered more to herself than the others. Or they don't care if we do. The plan had been simple at the outset. Intercept, query, reintegrate. But the first attempt, back in the outer rims, had backfired spectacularly. Their docking probe had been repelled by an unseen field, frying its circuits and leaving the human ship unscathed, slipping away like a shadow. Now, with the nebula's hazards closing in, plasma storms that could shred hulls, gravitational riptides pulling at reality itself, the stakes twisted higher. Zorak grunted over the line. Incoming anomaly alert. The ship's entering a distortion field. If we match course, we'll lose structural integrity in under an hour. Ilara's feed showed her scrolling furiously. Wait, cross-species logs. Humans charted the Veil decades ago during their exploration phase. They might have a path through. Lyra stopped pacing, her exoskeleton humming with tension. Clever adaptation or a trap? The Council's screaming echoed in her mind. The endless debates, the accusations flying between delegates. Without humanity's unspoken backbone, their tech loans, their quiet mediations, the alliance frayed at the edges. One wrong move here and it could unravel entirely. Adjust course, she decided, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Follow at maximum safe distance. Ilara, plot that human chart if it exists. Zorak, prep the emergency shields. We're not losing them to the void. As the frigate banked into the nebula's glow, a faint signal pinged from the human ship. Not a hail, but a data burst fragmented and encoded. Lyra's console lit up with it, lines of unfamiliar script scrolling past. Was this their explanation? Or just another layer of the silence? The plasma storm hit first, a roaring wave of ionized fire that battered their hull. Alarms wailed, and Lyra gripped the rail, watching the human vessel weave through it unscathed, its path a deliberate thread in the chaos. Grit, she thought, they always had that. But camaraderie, that was what the Council missed most. Zorak's voice crackled, shields holding at 62%. That ship's tech, it's adapting in real time. Ilara decoded a snippet. It's a warning, delegate. Coordinates for a safe lane, but only for us if we match their emissions profile. Lyra's mandibles parted in a rare smile of grim respect. Earned triumph, perhaps, but at what lingering cost? The Council would demand answers, and if this led to nothing, the screams would only grow louder. She keyed the adjustment, the frigate shuddering as it sinked. Into the Veil they plunged, humanity's shadow pulling them deeper. The chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting erratic shadows across the assembled delegates. Ambassador Kree of the Vixari clutched his console, his tentacles twitching with uncharacteristic fury. They can't just vanish. The humans were our mediators, our shield against the void storms. Without them, the treaty with the Zorath collapses by dawn. High Counselor Lyra of the Elandor leaned forward, her crystalline form humming with suppressed vibrations. She had always prided herself on composure, but the reports scrolling before her eyes, empty human embassies, silent comms arrays, fleets that had simply powered down and drifted into uncharted space, chipped at her resolve. We've demanded explanations through every channel, nothing, not a word, not a signal. It's as if they've erased themselves from the galaxy. Beside her, Delegate Thorn of the Grom, a hulking figure with armored plates scarred from a dozen border skirmishes, slammed a fist on the table. The impact sent ripples through the anti-grav field, nearly toppling a junior aide. Erased? Ha! They're hiding something. Remember the incursion war? Humans turned the tide with those ridiculous improvised weapons, scrap metal and sheer stubbornness. Now they slink away like cowards? I say we track their last known vectors, deploy the hunter drones. Kree's eyes narrowed, his voice a hiss. And provoke what? The humans never provoked. They endured. If they've left, it's because we've pushed too far. Endless audits on their colony expansion, sanctions on their warp tech patents. We treated them like primitives playing at civilization. Lyra raised a hand, silencing the rising murmurs. The chamber, vast and echoing with the hum of translators from 100 worlds, felt smaller now, suffocating. She activated a secondary feed, pulling up archival footage from the last council session. There they were, the human representatives, faces calm and unreadable, nodding through the debates on resource allocations. No grand speeches, no ultimatums, just quiet departures one by one until the seats were empty. We reconvened the emergency subcommittees, she declared, her tone steady despite the fracture in her core. Priority 1, stabilize the Zorath border. Thorn, mobilize your patrols. Kree, audit our dependencies. Every ship, every station that relies on human-engineered parts. If they're gone for good, we adapt. We must. Thorn grunted, already barking orders into his wristcom. But as the delegates dispersed into frantic huddles, Lyra lingered, staring at the blank human podium. A single thought pulsed through her. What if adaptation wasn't enough? The galaxy had leaned on humanity's silence for centuries, mistaking it for weakness. Now in the quiet aftermath, the real storm was brewing. Not from the void, but from within. Hours blurred into a frenzy of data streams and contingency plans. Kree's team uncovered the first cracks. A Vexari outpost on the fringe worlds. Its life support failing because human techs had maintained the seals. They warned us, Kree muttered to Lyra in a side corridor away from prying sensors. Said the alloys were proprietary, that we'd need their formulas. We laughed it off, called it posturing. Lyra's facets dimmed. And now? Kree's tentacles coiled tight. Now we improvise, or we fall apart. By cycle's end, the council chamber reconvened under red alert lights. Thorn burst in, his plates rattling. Scans confirm it. Human fleets aren't hiding. They're gone. Jump signatures lead to nowhere. But we picked up a ghost signal from one of their abandoned relays. A single phrase looping. We said nothing because words weren't enough. The room fell silent, the weight of it pressing like an unseen gravity well. Lyra stood, her voice cutting through the tension. Then we listened to that silence. No more demands. We rebuild without them, or learn why they left. As the session adjourned, a junior analyst approached hesitantly, datapad trembling in her grasp. Counselor, there's more. In the human archives, we seized stories, tales of their history, wars they ended not with speeches but with quiet resolve. What if this is the same? Lyra took the pad, her glow flickering. For the first time, doubt crept in, not of the humans, but of their own hubris. The screaming, it seemed, was only beginning. The chamber's holographic displays flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the assembled delegates. Crix, the Vorsian emissary, slammed his claw against the console for the third time that cycle, his iridescent scales flushing a furious crimson. Why won't it connect? The human relay should still be active. Protocol demands a 30-cycle grace period before full severance. Beside him, Lyra of the Elandari leaned forward, her elongated fingers tracing the error codes scrolling across her own panel. She was the calm one, always had been, her voice a steady hum amid the council's rising cacophony. It's not a glitch, Crix, they've rerouted everything. Look, their beacons are dark from Sol outward. No echoes, no pings. Humanity didn't just leave. They erased their footprint. The words hung heavy, and for a moment the chamber fell silent save for the distant whine of failing life support recyclers. Outside the orbital station, the void pressed in, indifferent as ever. Crix's mandibles clicked in frustration. He'd argued against escalation last session, warning that the humans' quiet withdrawal masked something sharper than mere diplomacy. Now, with trade routes collapsing and automated freighters drifting unmanned, his caution felt like prophecy. Emissary Voss, Lyrix called to the hulking Talaran across the aisle, who was methodically devouring a nutrient slab while staring at the blank star map. Your fleet scouts, any sign of their arc ships? The ones they launched without fanfare? Voss paused mid-bite, his four eyes narrowing. He was the pragmatist. Built for endurance rather than eloquence, his people still reeling from the resource pacts humanity had upheld until the very end. Nothing. Sensors pick up gravitational wakes, faint ones heading coreward. But no signatures. They've cloaked them somehow, ingenuity or spite. My engineers say it's like chasing ghosts in a nebula. Lyra's tendrils twitched, a sign of her growing unease. She'd reviewed the final human transmission a dozen times. No ultimatums, no accusations, just a polite acknowledgement of the Council's latest edict on colonial expansion. We overreached, she murmured, more to herself than the others. They asked for parity in the outer rims and we cited stability concerns. Now stability is unraveling. Crix paced, his claws scraping the deck plating. The plan had been simple. Dispatch a joint delegation to the Sol system, appeal to their vaunted sense of camaraderie. But as the shuttle prepped in the bay below, reports flooded in. Human outposts silent, automated defenses live, but unresponsive to hails. One scout vessel had ventured too close to Mars's orbit and returned with singed hulls, its crew babbling about adaptive fields that adapted too well, repelling without warning. We launch anyway, Crix decided, halting his circuit to face them. I pilot. Lyra, you handle comms. Voss, your muscle for any contingencies. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the dread coiling in his gut. The Council's screaming, metaphorical at first, had turned literal in the outer assemblies, where species dependent on human tech hoarded scraps and turned on each other. Lyra nodded, though her eyes lingered on the map, where red alerts bloomed like wounds across the galactic arm. And if they don't answer? If this is truly the end of the Alliance? Voss swallowed the last of his slab, rising to his full height with a resonant thud. Then we adapt, like they did. The shuttle's engines thrummed to life minutes later, a low vibration that set Crix's scales humming. As they detached from the station, the stars wheeled into view, Sewell a distant spark amid the Council's bloated heart. Lyra keyed the first broadcast, her voice steady. This is the United Council delegation. Humans, we seek dialogue. Respond, please. Static answered, thick and unyielding. Crix gripped the controls tighter, plotting a course that skirted the inner defenses. But as they accelerated, a proximity alert blared, not from human tech but their own sensors detecting an anomaly. A derelict freighter, human-marked, tumbling end over end. Its hull bore no battle scars, only the quiet efficiency of abandonment. Cargo bays empty, logs wiped clean. They're gone, Voss rumbled from the hold, peering through the viewport. All the way gone. Lyra silenced the comm, her tendrils drooping. The shuttle plunged onward into the widening silence that humanity had left behind. Back at the Council, the screams would continue, but out here, the void whispered of harder truths. Alliance is broken not by war, but by absence. And in that emptiness, the delegates pressed on, chasing echoes of a species that had chosen solitude over subjugation. Kaelor slammed his claw against the console, the holographic display flickering in protest as the latest probe telemetry stuttered into focus. The chamber's dim blue lights cast long shadows across the faces of the assembled delegates, each one etched with a weariness that had deepened over the cycles since the humans vanished. No grand declaration, no fiery exodus, just silence, and then they were gone, their ships blinking out from the shared networks like forgotten data packets. Why won't it connect? Hissed Lyra from the avian perch, her feathers ruffled in agitation. She leaned forward, talons clicking against the railing. As the Council's chief navigator, she'd charted every hyperspace lane humans had ever touched. But now those paths felt like ghosts, leading nowhere. It's not a connection failure, murmured Vex, the insectoid analyst, his mandibles clicking softly as he cross-referenced the feeds. Vex was the cautious one, always probing data layers before committing to a hypothesis. But even he couldn't mask the frustration in his segmented eyes. The probes are reaching the coordinates. Sol's remnants are there, empty stations, drifting habitats. But the humans, their tech is folding in on itself, self-erasing. Kaelor paced, his reptilian tail lashing the air. The resource shortages had hit hardest on his homeworld, where human-engineered fusion cores powered the atmospheric shields. Without them, storms raged unchecked, claiming outposts by the day. He stopped at the viewport, staring into the void where humanity's signature had once burned bright. We need to force a dialogue. Dispatch the interceptors to their outer colonies. If they're hiding, we'll drag them back to the table. Lyra's beak snapped shut. And risk escalation? The last simulation showed a 47% chance they'd interpret it as invasion. Humans don't bluff. They adapt. Her voice carried the weight of cycles spent studying their unpredictable ingenuity, from jury-rigged repairs in asteroid belts to psychological ploys that turned battles into routes. Vex's antennae twitched, pulling up a new overlay, flickering reports of human tech anomalies rippling through neutral space. Adaptation is the key. Look here. Their abandoned relays are broadcasting null signals, but embedded patterns suggest they're building something new. Isolated. Self-sufficient. He paused, his exoskeleton humming faintly. If we push too hard, we lose the last threads of intel. The chamber fell quiet, save for the low thrum of life support systems straining under the council's prolonged session. Kaylor clenched his fists, the scales on his knuckles whitening. The stakes clawed at him. His people's survival hinged on reclaiming that human grit, that relentless problem-solving that had propped up the Alliance for generations. But chasing shadows wouldn't bring them back. Prepare the interceptors anyway, Kaylor decided, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut. But arm them with translators, not weapons. We appeal first, remind them of the bonds. Lyra nodded reluctantly, her wings folding tight while Vex began encoding the mission parameters. His efficiency a small anchor in the rising tide of uncertainty. As the orders disseminated, a faint alert chimed. Another human relic, a derelict freighter, had been detected in the fringes. Kaylor turned to the display, hope flickering like a faulty plasma coil. Perhaps this time it held answers, or at least a way to stop the screaming that echoed through every council hall since the silence began. The comms array hummed with static as Alara keyed in the override sequence, her claws scraping against the console in frustration. The Vexari ship's bridge was a claustrophobic nest of flickering holograms and exposed wiring, the air thick with the acrid scent of overheating circuits. Kael, the burly Trellian engineer, loomed over her shoulder, his multifaceted eyes narrowing at the readouts. It's not responding, he growled, his voice like gravel underfoot. The human's encryption is layered like a damn onion. Peel one and two more make you cry. She didn't look up, her tail lashing. The council's emergency beacon had pulled them into this debris field 3 cycles ago. A graveyard of shattered hulls orbiting the neutral station where humanity had vanished without a trace. Now with the power reserves dipping into the red, their probe into the human ghost net was their last shot at answers, or survival. The rival Korthax fleet was closing in, their signatures blooming like predatory flowers on the tactical display. If they didn't crack this, the council's screams would echo from more than just the halls back home. They'd be silenced forever in the void. Try the backdoor protocol again, Alara snapped, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the cautious one, always the planner, but caution felt like a luxury when the stars themselves seemed to conspire against them. Beside her, Lyra, the sharp-tongued navigator from the avian sylph, perched on a jury-rigged stool, her feathers ruffled. Backdoor? That's what got us into this mess last time. Remember the feedback loop? Nearly fried my synapses. Kyle snorted, slamming a fist on the panel. Sparks flew and the array whined in protest. Options are thin, bird brain. The humans left this net wide open, like they wanted us to follow, or trap us. He wiped coolant from his brow, his brave facade cracking just a fraction. Ilara saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the unspoken fear of what they'd find if they did break through. The council had dismissed humanity's quiet exodus as posturing, a bluff from the upstart species that had dragged the galaxy into uneasy peace. But the empty docks, the silent trade routes, the way entire sectors had gone dark, it wasn't a bluff. It was abandonment. And now, with the Korthax probing the same edges, the stakes weren't just diplomatic, they were existential. The console beeped, a single green light piercing the red haze. Alara's breath caught. Got it. Lyra leaned in, her beak clicking thoughtfully. Look at this. Schematics for a relay network, but it's adaptive, like it's learning from our probes. Tension coiled in the air, thicker than the engine hum. They were in, but the net pushed back. Tendrils of code slithering through their systems like invasive roots. Alarms blared suddenly, the ship shuddering as a proximity alert lit up. Korthax interceptors, sleek and venomous, darted from the debris cloud. They're on us. Kyle bellowed, diving for the weapons station. Ilara's mind raced. Fire back and they'd reveal their position fully. Evade and they'd lose the signal. Hold the link, she ordered, fingers flying to reroute power. Lyra's wings flared in agitation. You're joking. We can't fight and hack at the same time. We have to. Ilara's voice brooked no argument, her cautious nature yielding to the grit of necessity. The first shots grazed their shields, a jolt that sent loose panels rattling. Kyle returned fire, his shots precise but desperate, carving glowing scars across the void. In the chaos, the human data deepened, whispers of a hidden exodus, fleets vanishing into uncharted folds of space, leaving behind puzzles for the Council to solve or fail. One fragment stood out, a stark warning in human script. "We built this for you. Don't break it." The net surged then, a countermeasure deploying an elegant retaliation. Their consoles glitched, simulations of Korthak ships multiplying like illusions. Lyra cursed, plotting an erratic course through the wreckage. "It's masking us, using the debris as cover. Clever bastards." Ilara allowed a grim smile even as another volley rocked the hull. The humans hadn't just left. They'd rigged the board, forcing the galaxy to play catch-up. But the cost was mounting. Their shields at 40%, a hull breach venting atmosphere from the lower decks. One wrong move and they'd join the ghosts. Kale whooped as a Korthak's fighter crumpled under his barrage. "Eat that!" But his triumph was short-lived. The lead interceptor locked on, its beam weapons charging with a malevolent whine. Ilara made the call, severing the link to divert everything to evasion. Data loss stung like a wound, but survival first. The ship twisted, engines screaming as they plunged deeper into the field. Behind them, the Korthaks pursued, but the human net's echo lingered. A breadcrumb trail that promised more if they could just hold on. As the pursuit dragged into a tense ballet of dodges and feints, Ilara stared at the fading readouts. The Council's screams back home were nothing compared to the silence humanity had imposed. And in that silence, she sensed the real challenge. Not just catching up, but understanding why they'd run, and what waited if the Council ever did. The ship groaned under strain, a reminder that some pursuits came at a price they might not afford. The chamber's holographic displays flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the assembled delegates. Ambassador Crix of the Valari Collective slammed his tentacle against the console, the impact sending a ripple through his gelatinous form. "This is madness." The human fleet's transponder signatures just vanished from the coreward routes. Vanished, as if they pulled the stars themselves into their void. Beside him, Counselor Lyra of the Avian Cyrath perched on her elevated dais, her feathers ruffled in agitation. She pecked at a datapad, her beak clicking sharply. "Not vanished, Crix, redirected. Our scouts confirm it, every colony, every outpost, every damned mining rig. They're folding space in patterns we've never mapped. And no declaration, no ultimatum, just silence." The room buzzed with murmurs from the other species. The burly, furred Grant delegates grunting in confusion, the ethereal Lumari whispering through their bioluminescent veils. At the head of the table sat High Arbiter Thorn of the Eldari, his crystalline exoskeleton humming with restrained energy. Thorn had always prided himself on his calm, his role as the Council's unflappable mediator. But now his facets dimmed slightly as he processed the feeds. Humans. Those unpredictable primates had been the glue in the fragile alliances, their endless ingenuity patching over the rifts between empires, and now they'd slipped away like smoke. "Options," Thorn intoned, his voice a resonant chime that cut through the din. "We cannot let this fracture us further. Propose your solutions," Crix's tentacles writhed. "Blockade their jump points. The Valari Armada can seal the relays before they consolidate. Force a negotiation, show them the Council's unity isn't a joke." Lyra's eyes narrowed, her talons scraping the perch. "And risk war. The humans have tech we barely understand. Their last gift to us was that shield matrix that saved the Orion hub from the nebula storms. If we chase them, we might ignite something we can't extinguish." Thorn leaned forward, his mind racing through simulations. The humans hadn't just left. They'd excised themselves cleanly, taking their trade routes, their diplomatic envoys, their infuriatingly effective problem solvers. The Council's economy teetered already. Resource shortages from the recent quantum flares, rival factions probing weaknesses. Without human mediators, the Grant Valari border disputes would erupt into full conflict within cycles. A junior aide, a diminutive Zeth from the underlevels, piped up hesitantly. "Arbiter, what if we send a delegation? Not an armada, but a neutral envoy. Appeal to their history with us." The room fell silent, then erupted. Crix bellowed, "Pa, begging!" to those who said nothing and walked. Thorn raised a crystalline limb, silencing them. The idea gnawed at him. Earnest outreach, not confrontation, but the stakes loomed. If the humans had truly severed ties, the council's screaming, literal and figurative, would echo through the void for generations. He nodded to the aide. Prepare the probe. Message of reconciliation. No demands. As the delegates dispersed to their sectors, Lyra lingered, her wings folding tightly. You think they'll answer, Thorn? He met her gaze, the holograms reflecting in his facets like fractured stars. If they don't, we've lost more than allies. We've lost the spark that kept us from devouring each other. Outside the chamber, alarms blared softly, another relay flickering offline. The human's absence was a wound, festering, and the council's first desperate lunge into the unknown had just begun. Kaelor gripped the console's edge, his claws scraping faint grooves into the alloy as the holographic display flickered with incoming transmissions. The council chamber's air hummed with urgency, every delegate's voice overlapping in a cacophony that drowned out the chamber's usual sterile hum. We've lost contact with 3 more outposts, he announced, his voice cutting through like a vibroblade. The Zerathian ambassador's tentacles writhed in agitation, slamming against the table. This is no coincidence. Humanity's withdrawal has destabilized the entire relay network. Our probes show their ships vanishing into uncharted voids deliberately. Lyra, the avian scout from the fringes, perched on her elevated dais, her feathers ruffled and eyes sharp. She had flown the longest patrols mapping the human exodus firsthand, and her caution bordered on paranoia now. It's not just vanishing, she chirped, her beak clicking with emphasis. They're erasing their paths, jump signatures that loop back on themselves, false trails leading to dead space. If we follow blindly, we'll trigger their defenses or worse, get stranded. She glanced at Kaelor, her old ally from the border skirmishes, seeking the steadiness he always projected. But even he felt the weight. The humans had said nothing, just packed up their embassies and fleets overnight, leaving behind a galaxy that suddenly felt too vast, too empty. The chamber doors hissed open, admitting Vex, the burly engineer from the core worlds, his exosuit scarred from hasty repairs on the failing grid. He lumbered forward, dumping a data slate onto the central projector. Talk is cheap. Look at this. The hologram bloomed, a web of fractured energy lines, the interstellar relays buckling under overloads no one had anticipated. Humanity's tech had been the glue, subtle, unassuming integrations that kept the Council's infrastructure humming. Now, without their maintenance protocols, cascades were failing. 1 outpost gone dark meant a sector's comms blacked out. 3 meant supply lines severed, colonies isolated. Vex's mandibles clicked irritably. We try rerouting through the secondary nodes, but they're degrading faster than we can patch. If we don't adapt their designs, and fast, we lose half the rim before dawn cycle. Kaelor nodded, his mind racing through contingencies. He was the strategist, the one who turned retreats into stands, but this felt like grasping at shadows. We can't replicate what we don't understand. Their ingenuity was in the simplicity, modular, self-healing systems we dismissed as primitive. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Pride had blinded them once, assuming human grit was no match for their evolved complexities. Now that grit echoed in the silence of abandoned stations, a deliberate void that screamed louder than any declaration. Lyra leaned in, her wings folding tight. Then we improvise. Send a joint team. My scouts for navigation, Vex's crew for the fixes. We hit the nearest relay. Jury-rig it with what we've got and trace one of their ghost paths. It's risky, but sitting here debating gets us nowhere. Vex grunted approval, already sketching schematics on his slate while Kaelor weighed the stakes. Failure meant more blackouts, more panic rippling outward like cracks in a hull. But success? It could buy time, force the humans to notice, or at least reveal why they'd left without a word. As the vote tallied in flickering lights, Kaelor felt the chamber's tension coil tighter. The Council's screams weren't just metaphorical anymore. Distress calls from isolated worlds were piling up. Raw with fear, they had to move. Adapt like the humans always had, or the void would swallow them all. He activated his calm, voice steady. Team assembles in 1 cycle. We go in, we fix it, we learn. No heroics, just survival. The words hung, a fragile bridge over the abyss humanity had opened. The delegate from the Vorith Collective slammed his tendrils against the obsidian table, the sound echoing like cracking ice in the vast chamber. We cannot delay. The rift in the outer sectors is widening. Without human mediation protocols, the energy storms will consume 3 systems by dawn cycle. His voice warbled with synthetic urgency, amplifiers buzzing as if the words themselves were fraying. Ilara, the avian emissary from the Sylph Enclave, perched on her articulated stool, feathers ruffling in agitation. She had always been the cautious one, her decisions measured like the slow spiral of a gas giant, but now her talons clicked rapidly against the metal. The humans predicted this. Their last transmission, vague warnings about unforeseen cascades. We dismissed it as posturing. If we had listened... She trailed off, eyes scanning the holographic display where red tendrils of instability snaked across the map. Crag, the hulking representative of the Durak clans, grunted from his reinforced seat. His rocky hide cracked faintly with each breath, a sign of the stress etching deeper fissures. Witty in council debates, he now resorted to blunt force. Predictions? They built the stabilizers without fanfare, fixed our fleet navs when no one asked, and we repaid them with suspicion. Now they're gone, and we're choking on our own exhaust. He leaned forward, massive fist thudding softly to emphasize the point, careful not to shatter the table again. The chamber's ambient hum faltered as another alert chimed. A secondary failure in the core relay, the very network humans had jury-rigged during the last convergence. Alara's mind raced, piecing together fragments from archived logs. The humans had left no farewell, no ultimatum, just an empty docking bay and a silent withdrawal from all channels. Whispers among the aides suggested it was deliberate, a quiet exodus to force reflection. But reflection wouldn't seal the rift. We adapt, Alara said finally, her voice steadying as she activated her personal interface. Wings half unfurled for balance, she projected a schematic pulled from human-designed archives, one they'd shared freely years ago. Their protocols emphasized redundancy. Krug, your clans control the nearest forge worlds. Can you reroute duranium plating to reinforce the outer boys? Forath delegate? Synchronize your quantum weavers to mimic the human stabilizer fields. It's not perfect, but it buys time. The Vorath's tendrils writhed in hesitation, bioluminescent tips flickering doubt. Mimic? Their ingenuity was opaque. What if it backfires, destabilizes the entire grid? Crag's laugh rumbled like shifting gravel. Then we fail spectacularly like we deserve. But sitting here screaming changes nothing. I've got my engineers prepped, say the word. Alara nodded, her beak clicking in resolve. As the chamber stirred to action, aides scurrying with data pads and comms, she felt the weight of the council's legacy pressing down. The humans had said nothing because words wouldn't pierce the complacency. Now in their absence, the real lesson clawed its way free. Survival demanded not dominance, but the grit to rebuild from the ruins left behind. Hours blurred into a frenzy of cross-species coordination. Craig's voice boomed over the links, directing molten streams of duranium into makeshift shields. His clan's brute efficiency turning raw ore into barriers against the storm's fury. The Vorath wove delicate quantum threads, their precision compensating for the human blueprint's intuitive leaps. Leaps no one else could replicate. Alara oversaw it all from the command nexus, her sharp eyes catching flaws before they propagated, adjusting vectors with avian grace. A jolt rocked the station as the first storm tendril lashed out, buckling a peripheral array. Alarms wailed, but Alara's team held, improvising a bypass from scavenged parts. Sweat beaded on non-porous hides. Exhaustion clawed at resolve. In a quiet moment amid the chaos, Crag muttered over a private channel, "They knew we'd need this push. Left us to our own devices. Literally." By the time the rift's edge stabilized, flickering into uneasy dormancy, the chamber was a tableau of weary triumph. Scars remained. 2 outposts lost, alliances strained by blame. Alara gazed at the fading holograph. The council's screams silenced not by return, but by the hard-won spark of unity. The human silence echoed still, a reminder that some departures forged stronger paths than any alliance ever could. The chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting erratic shadows across the assembled counselors. Elder Vrix clutched the armrest of his seat, his tentacles coiling tighter with each pulse of the alert. "They're accelerating," he hissed, his voice a rasp over the din. "The human fleet, it's not stopping at the outer markers. Projections show they'll breach the nebula in under an hour." Beside him, Liaison Kale, the only non-council observer permitted in these final deliberations, leaned forward, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaos of data streams. She'd been the bridge to humanity for cycles, the one who'd argued for their integration, their value. Now her mandibles clicked in futile rhythm. We have to broadcast again, appeal to their envoy protocols. They can't just... A burst of static drowned her words as High Arbiter Thorn slammed a claw on the console, silencing the room's murmurs. Thorn's exoskeleton gleamed under the emergency lights, scarred from old skirmishes with species long forgotten. Enough, we've broadcasted 100 times. Humanity said nothing and left. Their silence is the answer. His gaze swept the chamber, lingering on the empty she where the human delegate had sat until 3 cycles ago, until the quiet exodus began. Fricks rose unsteadily, his bioluminescent veins pulsing with urgency. The environmental hazard reports flooded in. The nebula's core, unstable after millennia of neglect, was the external threat they'd all ignored while courting human tech. Humans had warned of it subtly. In those dense alliance reports no one fully parsed. Now as their ships punched toward it, seismic readings spiked. If they destabilize it intentionally, the shockwave will ripple through our core worlds. Billions, Kale interrupted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. They wouldn't, not without reason. Remember the simulations they shared? Human ingenuity always finds a path, but they value alliances. She pulled up an archived feed on her personal holopad, the image of Captain Ellis, the human liaison, flickering to life. Ellis had been cautious, witty even in briefings, deflecting questions with that disarming smile. We built this together, Ellis had said once during a joint drill. But now the fleet's trajectory screamed abandonment. Thorn's claws scraped the floor. Value? They hoarded their warp drives, their shielding tech, doling it out like scraps. And for what? To leave us exposed when the nebula fractures. The room erupted again, accusations flying from the avian delegates, their feathers ruffling in agitation, the silicon-based observers emitting low-frequency whines of distress. Vrix felt the weight of it, the resource shortage hitting home as power rations dimmed the lights further. Their own fleets, patchwork from human scraps, couldn't match the exodus speed. Kale stood, pushing through the crowd to the central dais. Let me try one last transmission. Personal channel to Ellis. Her fingers danced over the controls, bypassing protocols in a move that would cost her position later. The line connected with a hiss, but only silence answered. No human face, just the endless void feed from their lead ship. Ellis, this is Kale. The Council sees your path. If it's the nebula, tell us why. We can adapt together. Static. Then a faint signal, garbled but unmistakable. Coordinates, beaming straight into the nebula's heart. Vrix's eyes widened. That's a stabilization array. Human design? They're not fleeing, they're fixing it. Thorn barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. Or luring us in to watch it blow. But doubt cracked his voice as the projections updated. The human fleet deploying drones, weaving energy webs into the cosmic storm. Tension coiled in the chamber like a spring. Every counselor frozen, waiting for the backfire or the breakthrough. Kale's mandibles parted in a rare smile. Grit, that's what they bring. Not conquest. Camaraderie in the void. The first drone lit up on the display, a pinpoint of human light piercing the hazard's fury. But as the nebula groaned in response, a new alert blared. Their own sensor arrays failing under the strain, leaving blind spots that could doom the effort. Vrix exchanged a glance with Kale. Teamwork now, or the scream of the Council would echo eternally. The chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting erratic shadows across the Council's vaulted hall. Ambassador Lirvex clutched the armrest of his seat, his tentacles quivering as the final transmission looped again. Humanity's silent exodus, their fleets vanishing into the void without a word. The other delegates, a motley assembly of scaled, feathered, and crystalline forms, leaned forward in a collective hush, their earlier screams reduced to ragged breaths. Kale, the human liaison who'd stayed behind as a gesture of good faith, stood at the chamber's center. His face was gaunt, etched with lines from weeks of fruitless negotiation, but his eyes burned with that infuriating human resolve. He'd been the one to deliver the news, or rather the absence of it. No ultimatums, no demands, just the cold fact of withdrawal. The Council's trade networks were crumbling, alliances fracturing, and now this. The humans had severed every quantum link, leaving behind only automated beacons that repeated a single, neutral message in every language. We wish you well. Why? Hissed Vornak, The insectoid from the hive worlds, his mandibles clicking in fury. You built this. Your ingenuity patched our defenses, your grit held the line against the void storms. And now you abandon us? Kale didn't flinch. He adjusted his collar, the fabric worn from endless debates, and met Vornok's compound eyes. We didn't abandon you. We stepped back. You've relied on us for too long, our tech, our strategies, our blood in your wars. Time to stand on your own. A murmur rippled through the hall. Learvex's mind raced, piecing together the reports. Human colonies thriving in isolation. Their ships repurposed for exploration rather than enforcement. The Council's vaunted fleet, once bolstered by human alloys, now sputtered with shortages. Without humanity's quiet innovations, the adaptive shields, the self-repairing hulls, they were exposed, vulnerable to the very threats they'd ignored while bickering over tribute. Elira, the avian diplomat with feathers still ruffled from the initial panic, rose unsteadily. This is madness. The nebula incursions will overrun us. Your people knew that. Why leave us to face it alone? Kale's lips quirked in a half-smile, not mocking but weary. Because alone is how we started. You called us primitives, then saviors, but never equals. We fixed your reactors when they failed, mapped the rifts you feared, even shared our medicine when plagues swept your worlds. But every concession came with strings. Your councils dictating terms, hoarding credit. We're done being the silent backbone. The holograms shifted, displaying real-time feeds. Empty docking bays at the central station. Human embassies shuddered. Their staffs evacuated on the last shuttles. A crystalline delegate shattered a data pad in frustration, shards glinting like accusations. The air hummed with tension, the kind that precedes fracture. Learvex finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. What now? You expect us to beg? No, Kale said simply. He stepped toward the exit, pausing only to nod at the assembly. We expect you to adapt, like we did. As the doors hissed open, revealing the starlit corridor beyond, the council erupted. Not in screams this time, but in urgent whispers, plans forming in the vacuum left behind. Kale walked away, the weight of their stares on his back, knowing the real cost. Friendships frayed, worlds that might fall before pride bent. But in the quiet of the hall he left, the first sparks of unity flickered, grudging, hard-won, and entirely their own. Outside, the station's lights dimmed, conserving power for the long night ahead. Humanity's silence echoed louder than any roar, a lesson carved into the stars.